Hello everyone. Good afternoon to all the people who are connecting today to our live on Facebook and YouTube, and those who are joining us in the Google Meet session. My name is Restrepo Alameda, and I am the president of the Foundation CIAP Kiwe. Before introducing Jerry, we would like to make a few things clear. As I already mentioned, we are doing live streaming through Facebook and YouTube. If at any time it cuts due to the internet failures, do not worry. The conference will be uploaded to the YouTube platform after the end of the session. This will be subtitled in English and Spanish for accessibility very soon. We thank those who are with us in the Google Meet room and ask them to turn off their microphones and cameras while our guest Jerry makes his first presentation. When you are about to speak, please activate your microphone. The use of the camera is entirely your choice. If you want your intervention to be delayed later, you can write to any of our means of contact and it will be removed from the final video. This is a space for dialogue and respect. Okay, now who is Jerry McCann? Jerry is currently senior advisor for Build Up, a non-global profit organization working beside local organizations through participatory interventions, research, and training to combine peace-building best practices, participatory methodologies, and digital technologies. Before his 20 years of work overseas in development and peace building, Jerry was a structural engineer and construction manager in California. Jerry is now based in San Francisco, but continues to work around the world. He is a digital nomad with a keen interest in engaging with individuals and groups that recognize the only solutions for peace come from within, supported when sought by greater external understanding and equitable partnerships. I don't know if maybe Jerry want to complement some information or if we can officially start your exhibition or your presentation.
That was wonderful, Laura. Thank you very much. Let's just jump into the presentation and then there'll be a chance for discussion afterwards. So let me share a screen here with all of you. Great. So thanks again, Laura and Kiwe, for the chance to be a part of these participatory dialogues. I'm always very excited to share ideas and gain other perspectives on the emerging discipline of peace engineering. I really enjoyed reading all of your ideas that you shared when you signed up for this session on what peace engineering means to you, and I look forward to the discussion following my presentation. This first slide represents how far I believe peace building and engineering can be apart. On the left, you see Somalis that I've worked with in the past that are talking into the night about the changes they would like to see for peace in Somalia. And on the right, you have an isolated and protected environment of an engineer in his office. And the question is really, how can these two worlds come together to bring us peace engineering? Let me start by grounding this presentation in something I believe deeply. You cannot engineer peace, but you can engineer peacefully. Today, I want to share ways we can think about engineering peacefully. After 20 years of walking alongside extraordinary peace builders, Kenyans, Somalis, Rwandans, Guatemalans, and Palestinians, to name a few, I have learned in the field what I could never learn as an engineer. There are many engineers around the world who have had access to and have been involved in peace building processes. And while some of them may refer to themselves as peace engineers, many of them are practicing it, not necessarily referring to it in that way. And I think we have a lot to learn from those extraordinary engineers who actually are practicing in conflict and post-conflict settings and have learned how to engineer peacefully within those settings. So many of you who know me have heard me talk about patient urgency. It's something that I've come to appreciate over my life as an engineer first, and then a peace builder in the last 20 years. And what I've really come to appreciate is the patience that's needed as a peace builder. But I also recognize the value of urgency that an engineer can bring, wanting to get to the solution. With peace engineering, there is an opportunity to achieve an optimum balance between patience and urgency that I believe is necessary and should be at the center of every peace building process. So now let me share with you a hypothetical that I also think is metaphorical. There are two communities that are often in conflict. They are divided by a river, with one on the side that provides easy access to markets and opportunities, while the other is isolated from those markets and opportunities, having only a footbridge to connect themselves to the other side. As a result, the more isolated community is constantly being accused of coming across the river on this footbridge and looting the other community, which leads to retaliatory measures, including sabotaging the footbridge. Through a community-based participatory peace-building process, representatives from both communities came together and agreed to build a proper vehicle bridge across the rivers so that the isolated community could then access the markets and opportunities. Together, they brought an engineer in from the capital city, 300 kilometers away, and asked him to design and construct a bridge for them. So really the process, what emerged out of the process was that the limited access that one community had to the markets that another community had was really at the center of the conflict. And thus the bridge became a potential technical solution to that problem. The two communities welcomed the engineer, who then got busy planning and designing the bridge. As with most engineers, this engineer followed the classic engineering cycle. First, he did an assessment of where the bridge should go based on where they preferred to situate the bridge on the river, the best access points to feeder roads, river embankment conditions, and the types of soils that would need to support the bridge foundations. He also consulted with the two groups from each side to decide on what kind of bridge design they were looking for. And they decided on going with an arch bridge. This was all part of the planning phase. But soon after that, the technical process started to become a peace-building problem. First, the design ended up being too expensive, and the only way to save costs was to relocate the bridge to a different part of the river, one that was more favorable to the privileged community. Then there were claims of corruption in the procurement of the materials that were purchased to construct the bridge, with all supply contracts going to, once again, the privileged community. It got worse when they started building the bridge, as they decided to start building the bridge from the side of the privileged community, understanding that the cost would significantly increase if they tried to start from the other side, where there was no bridge to cross. Naturally, that led to most of the construction jobs also going to the privileged community. At that point, some members of the isolated community saw the bridge as another unfair advantage and decided that they were going to destroy it before it gave even greater privilege to the other side. So in the middle of the night, they demolished the work that had started, and they set the storage facility for the construction materials on fire. The bridge project was abandoned, and the confrontations between the two communities worsened. So this is a situation where, even though there was a participatory process that led to a solution that both sides agreed to, the actual technical design and implementation of that process actually worsened the conflict rather than moved it closer to peace. So in this situation, we have really what became a linear approach, where it started out as a conflict, a peace-building intervention, a very effective one came in, and there was an understanding that there needed to be a bridge, knowing then that to actually design and construct a bridge was something too technical for the peace-building team and for the community. They actually sought an outsider to help them with that technical solution. And in the effort to come up with the best possible technical solution, a lot of the lessons that were learned during the peace building process were not taken into consideration. And by the time they got to the technical implementation stage of the process, the peace building remnants were almost completely gone. And then the way in which the bridge was constructed actually led to greater conflict. With peace engineering, we actually want to look at it differently. We want to look at the importance of an interwoven collaboration between peace builders and engineers. And this is what I want to share with you now, is the way that this could have been done in this case. So what started very interestingly in this case was there was participatory planning that was an important part of the process. And so they really got the first part right. But the interesting thing there is that the participatory planning was largely done by peace builders who then brought an engineer in at the latter stages of that participatory planning. Where things started to fall apart was first in the human-centered design. This is, rather than just going with a typical engineering design process, by committing to a human-centered design process, engineers can be sure that their processes throughout the design phase are integrally connected to the people who are going to be affected by the by the intervention. The next step, typically in the engineering cycle, rather than allowing the procurement to be done by those who are going to profit most from the procurement, more accountable approaches to procurement that allow those who are actually going to be affected by the process to be a part of the procurement process is very important. And being a part of that process could be as simple as basically the way that you broadcast, transparently open up the tendering for the procurement, make sure that if there are advantages that some have that others don't, that you find ways to give the disadvantaged an opportunity to also be a part of being awarded procurement supply contracts. At that point, moving into the construction phase, it's really important in a process where you're looking for greater inclusivity to make sure that the construction process itself has greater inclusivity. So in the case of the bridge, it's very important that from the very outset they're looking at ways to balance the opportunities between the two communities. And in many cases, effective peace building processes would even ensure that there was a greater number of opportunities given to the disadvantaged community than to the advantaged community, given the lack of opportunities that they have. That then would lead in many cases to considerations around the operations and the maintenance as well, which I didn't get into in this case. But oftentimes the implementation of a technical process is going to need ongoing operations. And oftentimes those operations can be done in ways that lack transparency. That lack of transparency then can lead to suspicions, which then can break down the intent of the technical solution to begin with. And even more importantly is the maintenance, because again, if you're bringing outsiders in to maintain any kind of technical solution, including the maintenance of a bridge, then you're really not empowering the communities to take full ownership of the solution, which is very important. So it's been very interesting in work that I've been involved in to recognize and appreciate the importance of capacity building to ensure that those who are a part of the communities are capable of supporting the maintenance of the technical solution. So you can see in this model, which is very similar to the traditional engineering model, what we're actually trying to do is in each phase of the model, look for the ways in which we can bring the peace building lens into the engineering process. And as you can see, what I put at the center of all of this is trust. Trust is a tricky thing because it's not something that you can acquire. It's actually, and it's not something that once you start to be able to build it, that you can simply enjoy the fruits of what you've built. Trust is a very elusive process that connects people together, that creates and allows for the sustained relationships needed in collaboration in peace building. And oftentimes technical solutions overlook the importance of this trust building measure. So through the integration of the peace building lens into these different engineering stages of a complete cycle, you can also see that the trust between those implementing the technical solution and those who are the beneficiaries of that technical solution can grow. With each stage, you can actually deepen that and build that trust further. And that can be very beneficial for continuing the processes of bringing technical solutions into conflict and into peace building. I would just say in my 20 years of working as a peace builder, but coming in with the kind of the orientation of an engineer, this is something that I've learned to really embrace. And in all cases, it's really important to understand that oftentimes those with the greatest privilege are the most ready to suggest that trust is important, but not recognizing that the privilege that they bring oftentimes comes with distrust from the sides that are disadvantaged. And that from a privileged position, it's easy to talk about trust. But from a disadvantaged position, there's been a history of being exploited, of being taken advantage of. So it's really important that the way in which the trust is built isn't based upon the perspective of the advantaged side, or even from the outsider perspective, but really is one that's developed and supported from all sides. So I wanted to really make sure that we had a lot of time to engage and discuss. I want to hear a lot about what you have to say. I think it's important to reiterate that my orientation towards peace engineering is one that is one of many different ways that peace engineering is being considered. And my approach to peace engineering has come because I started as an engineer, as Laura said, and then I was able to travel abroad. I started as a Peace Corps volunteer in Uganda, teaching civil engineering. And from there, I was able to go to Kenya and to work with Habitat for Humanity, a low-income housing organization. and then was given a chance to join a peace building organization by the name of Interpeace before joining Build Up. And in that process of transitioning from engineer to peace builder, I started to recognize some of the values that I was bringing as an engineer, but some of the dangerous ways in which those values could be misused. But luckily, I was surrounded by some amazing peace builders, as I've referred to earlier, and they helped me to recognize where I could be an asset and where I could actually be a threat. And I really appreciated that over the last 20 years and the way in which it allowed me to really not only appreciate but recognize my role needs to be one more as a supporting role than it does as a driving role. So my version of peace engineering is not where the engineer takes the lead and solves the problem. It's actually one where the engineer walks alongside others in a collaboration towards a solution that benefits from their technical knowledge. In order to walk alongside others, we have to be capable of communicating. And I think one of the biggest challenges I see right now as I continue to interact with this young field of peace engineering is the reluctance of both peace builders and engineers to learn a common language. Peace builders, the language of peace builders is often seen by others as something that's overly simplistic, that's touchy-feely, that's soft, while in fact it's quite complex, it's quite nuanced. It's based on a deep understanding of socio-political dynamics, something that engineers typically don't have. On the flip side, the language of engineers is seen as by peace builders as too technically sophisticated, daunting, intimidating, and they would prefer that the engineers just do their thing and not try to explain it. And so in the end, we actually have two important potential collaborators and unable to talk to each other. So one of the big challenges I think we have ahead of us in the peace engineering field, and I'm really happy to see Camilo Navarro here today because like myself, he's somebody that has been involved deeply on both sides of the equation. There may be others out there as well. But I've been able to have really interesting opportunities to explore this challenge of languages in the work that I'm doing with universities in the US, including Drexel University, George Mason University, and the University of San Diego. All of these universities, along with others, are looking for ways that they can try to integrate these two fields and come up with a product that is capable of engaging both as a peace builder and as an engineer. So I think I'm actually going to stop it here and hope that there's an opportunity for others to share their experiences, for you to interject with questions, and for us to explore together as we continue these participatory dialogue talks. Thanks again, Laura, and all of you for the opportunity to share with you today.
So yes, thank you so much for that presentation, Jerry. I would really like to invite you all who are here at Meet to share your experiences, maybe presenting yourselves. So I really want to hear who are you. Maybe Jerry can ask you some questions to move on the conversation. So I don't know if maybe one of you want to present and do some questions.
Hi, Jerry. Hi, Laura. How you guys doing? Well, first of all, I want to thank Laura for organizing these dialogue spaces. And it's so great to have you, Jerry, sharing your experience and your thoughts about how peace engineering, this peace engineering new field is evolving and where it should go. And just engineering peacefully, as you always said. For everyone else, my name is Camilo Navarro. I'm a professor at Sergio Arboleda University and Los Andes University. I'm I'm a peace building masters and organizational manager masters. I teach systemic thinking and system dynamics, and now I'm working on my PhD on peace engineering and how to use engineering tools to help peace building communities. And well, peace engineering is a really big part of my investigation, the work that I do every day. And well, I will be happy to share anything with you if you want to. Thanks again, Jerry.
Thanks. Actually, I want to, with Camilo on, I just want to say that um, I I actually came back to the United States in 2016 after living in Nairobi, Kenya for 16 years. And when I returned and I first started hearing this term, peace engineering, I decided, given that I was an engineer and a peace builder, that I could easily adopt this idea. And I naturally gravitated towards this idea of engineering peacefully. At the same time, I started to become aware of other engineers who really felt that engineering, especially systems engineering, had developed to a level of sophistication where, and with the computing power that was available, that we could literally model something as complex as a societal conflict and use systems modeling and simulations to start to unlock solutions to conflict. And I was very opposed to that orientation. It made me very nervous to think that there were engineers out there who believed you could actually solve conflict through the modeling and computers. And then I met Camilo, who, for one, has a lot of credibility because he comes from Colombia. So unlike myself, who is actually living comfortably now in San Francisco, I had a chance to talk to an engineer who comes from a conflict and post-conflict country and has a strong background, as he's shared, in both peace building and engineering, and who has really looked very closely at the ways in which systems design and systems thinking could be applied to peace building. And what I love about the conversations that Camilo and I have been able to have is that we've recognized that one of the challenges with engineers is that they love to model things. And generally what they like to do is they like to go out to wherever they need to go out to. So in the case of this bridge, the engineer went out, he saw the river, he saw what was on both sides of the river. What he saw on both sides of the rivers weren't communities. He saw an embankment, he saw soil, he saw water, he saw the span of the river, and he saw the kinds of traffic that would need to cross that river in terms of vehicles. That's what he saw. And he went back to his office with all of that information, and he started drawing sketches of loading diagrams. For those who understand civil and structural engineering, you know what I'm talking about. And then just started to crank out a solution, and it wouldn't matter if it was in Colombia or if it was in California, because it was just about a river and soil conditions and materials. And so it's a very extractive exercise, and it's one that generally doesn't pay attention to the human dynamics that are going to be affected by that technical solution. When I started talking with Camilo, knowing that he was a big systems thinker, and that what he was trying to do was contrary to what I thought could be done. We started to think together about the opportunities that could come from the process of systems modeling as a peace building process rather than as an engineering process, in which the actual, and there's a lot of this already being done in the peace building world. Systems thinking and systems mapping is becoming a very important tool for peace builders. And because they don't have the same level of sophistication in systems thinking than engineers, there are potential opportunities for these two worlds to be able to come together. And I think Camilo represents that in his own studies. But I've changed my tune. I still say you can't engineer peace, but I'm more interested in aspects of systems engineering that could be applied to peace building. So I just want to, with Camilo in the audience, I want to thank you for enlightening me. And I look forward to continuing our discussions, Camilo.
Thanks, Jerry. Of course, I remember the first time I mentioned engineering piece to Caroline. She said like, whoa, that's not something you want to be saying everywhere, because you cannot engineer social behavior. You cannot engineer um, people. But then having these dialogues with you and Caroline and different people, I realized that maybe is engineering for peace, and maybe what is important is that you do it peacefully, like you mentioned, engineering peacefully. And I by studying these different areas of knowledge, I have realized during these last years that there is a lot that they have in common. That there is so many things that they have in common. Sociology and engineering that most people doesn't even know about, and that those are those bridges that can bring things together and help shaping these projects, so that engineering interventions have the desired impact. I have a few little models that make on a 3D printer about the work I'm doing right now with desmovilizados. How you say that, Laura? Ex guerrilla members that are
Yeah,
the community.
yes,
Ex-combatant.
members.
So one of the things that we realize is the importance of good visualization tools as part of these safe dialogue spaces. So the fact that people can see things, just like the cycle you just show us, just this visualization effect in the safe dialogue spaces, if very powerful. So now what I do is I try to show them the the complex social systems in really easy ways, and then I try to show them how that really complex system can be, how complexity can be reduced when you do a good engineering intervention, but also how an engineering intervention can end up in a worsen problem, as you mentioned, when you do not take into account all actors' perspective. Then you can be creating the scenario of a even worse problem for the future.
Yeah, and something about you're talking about, I think that Blessing has a lot of reflections about it. Blessing is from Toronto and he's here with us. He's been working with relational aspects of participatory action research, and I think that she's also an engineer, and I would love to hear more from Blessing if you have
Oh,
something to say in this point.
okay. Hi, my name is Blessing. I am originally from Nigeria, but I reside in Toronto. If you don't mind, can I put off my video? I think it's giving off feedback. So the first time I heard about peace engineering, I heard it from Laura actually. And when Laura said peace engineering, I was like, what? And so I did go to read about it. And because I have a background in engineering, I actually studied engineering in the university, but I have worked as a social worker for 15 years and counting. I tried to reconcile engineering and social work, and like social justice, which is also peace. Because like Jerry said, you cannot engineer human beings. And so from my background, I try to see how this is possible. Here in Toronto, I work as a community-based researcher. And I like that diagram that Jerry actually put up. And I like what was in the middle of the diagram, the trust. And I think that one mistake that we make, either as community-based researchers or as peace engineers, is the fact that we expect trust to be handed over to us on a platter. So when normal researchers go into communities, they expect that the community trusts them because they feel they are coming to do good for the community. But as a community-based researcher, as a peace engineer, what we should strive for is to earn the trust. We ought to wait for the community to trust us at their own pace. And like Jerry said, we have to include them in all phases of the intervention. I cite a very popular example. Back in Nigeria, somebody went to a community and built them a borehole. And this person went into the community and assumed that, oh, they actually fetch water from a stream. So the person assumed that they needed tap water. And so they came back to the community and they erected boreholes, they erected taps. But a year after, during monitoring and evaluation, they realized that nobody in the community was using the taps. They were not using the taps, they were not using the borehole. And so upon inquiry, the community members said they did not need the taps. Actually, what they needed was spaces for recreation. So parents actually send their children to the stream. They make them go that far to fetch water so that fathers and mothers can have time alone. But if the researchers who came into the community had worked with this community, had gained their trust, they would have actually found out the need of the community. One key thing also that Jerry said that I really liked was the language, because we engineers, we tend to have very big languages. We tend to have very bogus languages and terminologies. And then if you're working in the social justice space, we have to be careful of using very big terminologies. We have to be very careful of using abbreviations. So people go into the communities and start using abbreviations, let's say, for example, GBV, assuming that everybody in the community knows what GBV is, assuming that people in the community know what the acronym stands for. But as a community-based researcher, as a peace engineer, we have to be mindful of the fact that realities are different. And so we have to come with the simplest terminologies, with the simplest solutions to carry everybody along. I think it was 2 sessions ago, I presented with Isabel on observation as one of the methods for community-based research. And I see observation playing an important role in peace engineering. I see observation playing an important role in research. Because when you go to the community, when you're going as a community-based researcher, you humble yourself because you are the tool. You're actually going to learn. I think that a mistake we make is that we think we have the answers. We forget that everybody is an expert is an expert of their own lives, of their own lived experiences. So when we come observing, then we can carry everybody along. Everybody's input will be included in the interventions we're coming up with. I'm fascinated by the term peace engineering because I'm trying to see, like I did try to do some reading, and in fairness, I did not see any mention of human beings. So like one of the definitions I got said peace engineering is the putting together of structures that will ensure peace. But I also know that even if the structures are put in place, there is no peace without human beings. So I think that one thing we have to do together, one way we have to work together to make peace engineering holistic in the social justice sector is how to make people the center of the engineering, of peace engineering. Because we cannot engineer, even if we can engineer character, we cannot engineer character without people involved. And that's where I see that both sectors have a clash. And I'm hoping that going forward, I'll be included in working with Jerry, Camilo, Laura, to see how we can build more on peace engineering. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Blessing. It's wonderful to see you here. And I loved your talk in the first participatory dialogues, and especially on observation. I just wanted to react to a couple of things that Blessing brought up that I think are really, really important. The first is that this idea of trust, and I love the way you put it, Blessing, that the reality is we have to earn it as outsiders, as people coming in and playing a role, whether we're engineers or peace builders or peace engineers. And I think that because the world has woken up to the industry of research, the industry of extraction, the industry of benefiting from studying the behavior of others, that there's a built-in mistrust that comes. So not only do we have to earn trust, we first have to demonstrate that we shouldn't be mistrusted, and that's a long road. That's not a short road. And one of the reasons that in the peace engineering cycle that I start with participatory planning and human-centered design is exactly to get at the point that Blessing is making. That if you're not starting from the perspective and the full inclusion and engagement of the people themselves, then you're going to do what engineers often do, which is take shortcuts to get to the modeling, to get to the calculations, to get to the solution. I think another really interesting point that Blessing brought up is how important it is for us not to be more sophisticated than the needs of the communities or the people that we're engaging with. So a lot of the work that I've done as an engineer in different parts of the world has actually, I've spent more time protecting the internal technical processes from external technical elitism. That a lot of the technical world involved in international development and in international peace building will bring such sophistication to a context that it basically excludes the context itself from the solution. And so I agree with Blessing that it's really important that the solutions are ones that are understood and embraced, and that we're not creating a disconnect because we're over sophisticating the types of solutions that are needed. And then finally, I would just say that when it comes to observation, which is something that if you have a chance to look at Blessing's work and some of the wonderful things that she's doing around that aspect of research, it also highlights that an engineer in the early stages of a peace engineering intervention may play a very limited role, because in the early stages, it's really about conflict resolution, and it's about participatory action research. And those things aren't necessarily going to have a dominant role for the engineer. So it's at that time that the engineer would benefit from playing an observatory role, so that they can better understand the human dynamics that are going to be at play with the technical solution. And likewise, as we get further along, for instance, in the actual procurement or in the construction phases or production phases, the peace builder may not play a dominant role, but it's still very important that they're there in an observation role, so that they can observe what the effects of the solution or the implementation of the solution are having on the conflict dynamics. So I think this idea of observation is one that has a really important role for peace engineering as well. So thank you, as always, Blessing. And I would love to collaborate further. So let's find each other in this space.
Thank you so much, Jerry.
Yeah, so I don't know if anyone here want to say something or present themselves, Kapumba, or maybe Felipe, or Brian, or Angela. Here we have a question from Facebook, I think so, and is, do you think that the engineering dynamics of peace will be changing after this pandemic, or after all these things that are happening right now around the world?
I'm not sure if they're going to change, but I think it provides us with a great opportunity. I think there's going to be a tremendous need for technical solutions that engineers can bring. I think that the risks right now of this pandemic and some of the economic and sociopolitical challenges that it's bringing, some of the evidence that we're starting to recognize in terms of our impact on the earth, and how taking our foot off of the industrial pedal has actually allowed the earth to recuperate a little bit more than in any time during our industrial evolution. So I think that there's a lot of things that are emerging out of this pandemic that actually, especially from the perspective of peace engineering, are important opportunities for us to pay attention to, and to seek opportunities to be a part of technical solutions through a peace building lens. And certainly the work that I do with Build Up, we're paying a lot of attention to this, because this is also, in any kind of a shock like this, especially a global shock like none we've ever seen in our lifetimes, the opportunity is provided to both those who believe in peace and both those who profit from conflict. So it's upon us to recognize that some of the voids, some of the vulnerabilities that are emerging out of this pandemic can lead to greater levels of conflict. They can lead to greater levels of economic and social imbalance. They can lead to greater levels of exclusion. And one thing that the engineering field has, much more so, unfortunately, than the peace building field, is resources and capital and privilege. And if those could be used in ways that start recognizing the need to rebalance this planet, both in terms of the impact we're having on the environment, but also in the way that humanity has become so imbalanced within itself. These are golden opportunities. So I do think it's a time that peace engineers need to assert themselves. It's a time for the field to also recognize the role that it can play. I think Camilo mentioned Caroline Bailey. Caroline has been thinking about this for 15 years, probably for her whole life, but for the last 15 years, she's been a part of leading this group of engineers, social justice and peace. And this is a group that's really paying a lot of attention to the pandemic and some of the challenges we're going to face and some of the opportunities to reset the way we do things in the aftermath of this pandemic. So I encourage all of us to pay attention and to see what we can do to take advantage of the opportunities that will emerge.
Thank you for answering. Jerry, I have a question. I am curious about these slides that you show. Do you do it by yourself, or I mean, the methodology comes through your experience and how you've been learning from your experience engineering peacefully in Africa most of the time?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a problem with people that are really on the kind of the action side of things, the implementation and doing side. We don't tend to spend enough time capturing and writing about these experiences. And for me, because a lot of the literature that I was reading, I wasn't really completely satisfied with, but actually the conversations that I've been having and just playing around with some of the concepts that I've learned through peace building, which is incredibly researched, and there's some wonderful literature out there and guidance in terms of peace building. But on the peace engineering side, it's a little bit light right now. So most of the time when I'm presenting, I'm just presenting from the perspectives that I've gained, the conversations that I'm having, the people that I'm meeting along the way. In this presentation, I didn't get to really share, but let me just give you one example of, I'm most inspired by the engineering that I see happening in places like Somalia, Pakistan, Colombia, that actually is addressing challenges within these conflict and post-conflict countries by engineers who are just sensitive to the human dimensions, much more so than typical engineers. So in many of the cases where I've seen wonderful applications of peace engineering, the engineers involved don't even know that term. It's kind of like blessing, where you just hear it and then you're curious about it. But I'm sure if Blessing was doing any engineering work, she would be a great example of peace engineering. So, but one example that I want to share is in Somalia. I've been traveling to a part of Somalia for the last 15 years. It's in the northeast. It's called Puntland. So it's one of Somalia now is a federal government, so it has member states. And one of the member states is Puntland in the northeast. It's actually the actual horn of the Horn of Africa. And the capital of Somalia, of Puntland is called Garowe. And when I first started going to Garowe in 2004, it was just this small little town that was designated as the capital of this emerging federal member state, even before there was such thing as a federal member state. And they only had as an airport, all they had was a dirt strip. There were only about 30,000 people in the town. The last time I had traveled there before last year was 2014. It was still quite small. When I traveled back last year, I was amazed. For one, I was able to take a small jet, commercial jet, from Nairobi to Garowe. So they had built a legitimate runway and a small airport. On the travel from the airport into the town to interact with my Somali colleagues, I passed this power generation plant that was wind turbine, solar, and with diesel generator backups. And I became very curious. I mean, these were, 20-meter wind turbines, the kind of wind turbines you generally don't see in that part of Africa, and that you see a lot of in the US and Europe. And so I became fascinated who brought in all of this technology and how is it being managed. So I got to meet the actual owner of the company, and the engineer, and also the financier, the man that financed it. All three of them were Somalis. The engineer was actually a 27-year-old Somali woman who had been trained in Sudan at a university there, and she was running, basically running the whole system. It was providing 80% of the electricity for the town of Garowe, which had grown from 30,000 when I first went there to over almost 300,000 today. The whole thing was financed by Somalis, including the chief financier, who I also met, and the entire design was done by a Somali who had started in power generation design work in Mogadishu in the 90s. What was even more remarkable was getting that heavy equipment into that part of Somalia. They had to go through an area that that was in conflict with where the equipment was going. So they literally had to bring the equipment into a port of a different state of Somalia that was in conflict with Puntland. And what these engineers were able to do was to engage with engineers from Somaliland, the neighboring state. And because of the interest the engineers in Somaliland had of this solution, they agreed to find a way to get the equipment by road through Somaliland into Puntland and across literally the border that was in conflict. And it was just, to me, just a remarkable demonstration of peace engineering. And when I told them that, they were really curious, because none of them had heard of the concept of peace engineering, and none of them thought what they were doing was peace engineering. But to me, it was just a brilliant example. And so I think this gets back to, again, Blessing's point about observation. There's so many ways, and I saw this as well when I went to Colombia, and saw the interesting things that were being done by Camilo Elijah, and also by Jaime, forgetting his other name, both professors at Uniandis. And it again was just examples of people who recognized the importance engineering could play in peace building and were sensitive to how an engineer could do that peacefully. So that's a long answer to your question, Laura, but pretty much the content that I share today is from my own experience, and embracing the experiences that others have shared with me or that I've been able to observe.
Yes, thank you so much for your answer. It happens the same to me in 2017 when I met you in the Build Peace conference. I didn't know that peace engineering exists. So it's been a huge opportunity for me to meet you that year. And that inspires me a lot. And I think that I've been saying this to you a lot of times, but I never give up in saying that I am very curious and very inspired by your work. And that make me open Umakiwa Foundation in a part. So thank you for that. Umakiwa in part exists by you because you inspired us. And also I want to say to you that in SPEED, because I am Vice President of Strategic Development in SPEED, that is a student platform for unique education, we are going to open research line in peace engineering, and we are going to strengthen networks for students to talk more about peace engineering, because I think that this great connection between social work and engineering and all these important things that Blessing and Isabel said in the first session about hearing what others have to say, putting trust in our relationships, and maybe engineering be more like having more humility, to maybe understand that we don't have all the knowledge, and we really have the choice and the big opportunity to learn from the communities that we are working with. So I think this is a huge yeah, like a huge opportunity for all the people who is joining us today, and the people who is going to see and watch what you've been doing around the world with Build Up or yourself, and people like here in Colombia, Camilo, like Andres Acero, that is not here, that Juan David, a lot of people that we've been that are been working with this, Catalan Bale, all the Drexel University professors like Mira Olson, and I mean I can do a lot, a huge list, but I think that we need to democratize more about knowledge in engineering, democratize more the term, what about their meaning, because I also think that maybe peace engineering has a meaning globally, but we need to get into the conversation, to get involved more people that can support and also share their ideas about what is peace engineering. So I think having here Blessing with a lot of background about community-based participatory action research, and you from peace engineering, and a lot of people who is connecting right now around the world, I think it's wonderful for me. I think that I am very inspired about it, and about your work, and yeah.
Yeah, maybe I can just share with others, because Build Up, every year we have an annual conference, and it's really a chance to celebrate the innovation that's happening from within the contexts themselves. What I love about Build Up is that they've recognized how important it is to pay attention to what's emerging out of conflict, not what we can bring to it ourselves, and ways that we can support what's emerging out of it. So in 2017, in our Build Peace conference, we decided to go to Colombia, to Bogota, and along with colleagues at Drexel University, we wanted to have a peace engineering workshop in that conference. And so together we thought, rather than us going down there and trying to share our ideas about peace engineering, and this was just after Colombia had come out of its peace agreement, we decided to ask the students at University de los Andes if they how they think engineers could play a role in the peace agreement. And it was quite nice, because it was right around finals time. The professor wasn't sure many people were going to have the time to respond. We got 14 responses. 11 were from female students, which was wonderful. And one was from Laura, who hadn't ever heard about, but I didn't ask her what a peace engineer could do. I asked her what an engineer could do to contribute to peace in Colombia. And she came up with a wonderful answer, and she was one of the two we chose to present at the workshop. So rather than us presenting, we actually had the professor Elijah present, as well as the two students. And I think it was just a wonderful demonstration of, rather than going in and trying to tell people what something is, really give people a chance to share their perspectives, especially as I've always told people around the world. And I'm pretty sure Kapumba is a dear friend of mine from Kenya, and he knows this very well. But I've always said, I can always go back to San Francisco and live in peace and comfort. So don't rely on somebody like me to tell you how to build peace. And so, all that I've learned about peace building has been from people who have been in extraordinary situations that none of us would ever want to be in, and that I could never imagine being in, and that have had the resilience and had the fortitude to stay with it and to believe in peace, to be optimistic when the world is being pessimistic. And it also has inspired me so much. So Laura, you say that you inspire me, but I also was incredibly inspired by your interest and your courage to actually submit your idea to us and then to present it. So it's an equal inspiration.
Thank you so much for that. Really, thank you. And I think that maybe Camilo has something to say because he activated
Yeah,
his
just a
mic.
little intervention. I wanted to say that with peace engineering, everything is new. It's not like we're talking about history. We are looking at work that is emerging in the forefront of this new emerging field. And we should look to the research, or maybe we should look to where research is heading in this new emerging field instead of looking where it has been, because it's making his own way. And I'm not surprised when Blessing said she had never heard about this peace engineering term, or your colleagues in Somalia, because I get that a lot when I work with communities, and I bring that up for the first time. It's like, peace engineering, is that a thing? And what I start to realize is that the work that we have been doing with Engineers Without Borders, you, Jerry, with the Peace Corps, humanitarian engineering in Brazil with the Ingeniería Popular, the grassroots engineering, all those fields had created the the foundings for this new field. And if you see what is to do engineering peacefully, as you said, is a mix of all those things. It's a mix of Engineers Without Borders principles with humanitarian engineering, with popular engineering, grassroots engineering, and I will imagine also what you do with the Peace Corps. And it comes from this willing of doing something to work with and for the community. And yeah, this was just one little last thing that I wanted to add. And I wanted to thanks again Laura for inviting me to this space. I find it wonderful to have the space to talk about these subjects. And I have to go to another meeting, but bye Jerry, bye Laura. It was really nice to see you, and just a blessing. So nice to meet you, and everyone else. I hope to see you soon. Bye bye.
Mila.
Bye. Thank you, Camilo. Yeah, I wanted to say that, I wanted to say that for me, I think for the first question that Jerry was asked, if Jerry, you don't mind me saying something, I wanted to say that going forward, we cannot go back to the way the world was. We have a new reality. So everything we have to do now has to factor in the new reality. And I think that for peace engineering, one key thing we have to factor in is the fact that peace is not homogeneous. So peace means different things to different people. And so in trying to engineer peace, we have to come up with simplistic methods that will allow the different meanings of peace to be carried along.
I love that, Blessing. I think you're absolutely right. And it's it needs to be simpler, and oftentimes when something needs to be simpler, it requires us to think about things in more complicated ways, because complexity comes easy to engineers, simplicity does not. And so I think, part of what we have to understand is that the gaps that have been created. I mean, even engineering as a profession is not that old, and it's allowed itself to become more and more reductionist and more specialized, which means that it's less and less connected to the intended and unintended consequences of that solution to the broader society. So I absolutely agree with you, and I think certainly something that we're seeing around the world in parallel, and not coincidentally to this pandemic, is this uprising of exposure of the injustices that we've seen around the world. And certainly in this part of the world, the treatment of Black people is central to that, but also to people of color, Indigenous people, women. There's so many structural injustices that are part of most of the world, and especially most egregiously those that are suggesting that they're actually places of freedom and justice, where they're far from that. So I appreciate that blessing, that call to action for all of us to realize we not only can we not go back, but we want to do everything to resist the desire for those who want to go back, and play a role in moving forward.
I really want to make a question, maybe for the public and the people who is in Facebook and YouTube. Do you have any ideas or any projects that you can do here, or people can connect with you to maybe know about what you've been doing, or what do you recommend to them to connect with peace engineering and to, or engineer more peacefully? And yeah, that's a question.
I mean, I really love the work that that Drexel University is doing, and they have some certificate programs now, and even some online courses where I think you can even take that course just to get a little bit more exposure. I've been working with them for the last 4 years, and they've really embraced this idea of engineering peacefully, which I'm really appreciative of. And Mira Olson's been wonderful. We've collaborated and co-taught a course together online. Also this year, we're having our Build Peace conference. The Build Up team is having the Build Peace conference in Cape Town, South Africa. But we're also going to make it accessible online for the entire conference. So I would just say that in addition, you can go to howtobuildup.org, and you can check out that conference. I think that that's a really nice way to gain access to the kind of work that we're doing. And then I think through Facebook and through Twitter, you have my contacts, so you can direct message me. Anybody that's interested in peace engineering, I'm interested in spending time with. So please reach out, and I'd be more than happy to talk more with you and share some ideas and listen to your ideas as well.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think that we are going to have Mira Olson here in August, maybe, or in September. So people who is now hearing us, you can join to participatory dialogues with Mira Olson. I think that she's going to talk about peace engineering again. And as Jerry said, she's a wonderful woman, and she's been doing a lot of work with the master's degree at Drexel University. And I think that she's doing a great job. She's also connecting with a lot of activities here in Colombia, and I think that maybe it will be interesting to create something with the people who is interested. Kiwe also is opening a line in engineering and peace building. We've been doing this since 2017. So I think it's a huge opportunity that you can allow people to write you directly through Twitter and Facebook. Kiwe has your contact, so if you allow us, you can we can share your email too if you want to. And I don't know if any of you have anything more to say, maybe some questions, maybe Kapumba or Angela or Blessing, who is here in Meet.
Okay, I would like just to echo what others have said. This is Kapumba from Kenya, and Jerry, after being under his coach for more than 10 years, and I'm still fascinated by what he's presenting as peace builders. So I'm always want to get close to him and understand the whole principle of peace builders. So for me, it's a great privilege to be able again to hear him after such a long time. So thank you very much, Jerry, and the entire team. Thank you.
Nice to see you, Michael.
Okay.
Michael and I worked very closely together for, as he said, 10 years with Interpeace. He's still with Interpeace, and he's actually a computer scientist and computer engineer. So we didn't talk a lot about peace engineering when we were together, but I look forward to seeing you again in Nairobi, and we can explore more of this idea together.
Thank you, Jerry.
It was nice to see you, Kapumba, and really nice to see that you are inspired too by Jerry. And it will be great if we can connect too. And I would like to do Kapumba's question, and it's what do you feel, or how do you feel when you work with Jerry? Is he a really close friend?
He's more than a friend. That's after having him for more than 10 years, and I've really learned out of a lot of from him. And he should tell you, the first time I met him, I could not even construct a sentence in English. So he will speak. The only thing I could do, I could only laugh. I'm sure he was not understanding why am I not responding. I was just laughing because I was not understanding anything after coming from a French-speaking country. So under his coach, I was able to pick up pieces, going to university, finish my computer science. And even after finishing my computer science, he's still challenging me. I always feel like he's more computer science than I do. So he's somebody, when we talk about science, engineering, it is his passion, and his passion for it. And passion for peace builders, it's so amazing when you see him in the field. And even after he went back to San Francisco, almost at each day we always quote him. He is everything we have to quote him, because he's the example of almost everything. So that's a great resource, that's why we can see, even after remaining, we are almost 2:23 a.m., but I will always have to sit and wait and to listen to him. That's how great that Jerry is.
Thank you, Kapumba.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I don't know if anyone wants to say something else. Well, I think that we don't have any questions more questions on Facebook and YouTube. I think that I just want to thank you, Jerry, for being here with us at Participatory Dialogues. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Kapumba. Thank you, Blessing, and all the people who were here at Google Meet. It was really nice to see you here and to share ideas about peace engineering.
Thank you, Laura, and look forward to the upcoming sessions. I'm so happy that Mira is going to be joining you as well. And yeah, look forward to future collaboration.
Thank you so much, Laura. I am glad I joined in the class today. And Jerry, I'll be taking your email and Twitter from Laura so I can connect with you further.
Wonderful. Looking forward to it.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Thank you so much, Jared. Thank you so much to the people who was joining through Facebook and YouTube Live. So see you in next participatory dialogues.